Hey YouTubers, it's Steve again from Rescape. I'm gonna add this to Rescape 2.0 since it hasn't been that long. I think the difference between Rescape and 2.0 are like years, and I made a 2.0 video just a few months ago. And I really don't know what I'm gonna say because this is one of those videos where it's basically you don't really plan. You just kind of have a general idea of what you're gonna talk about, and then hopefully it comes out. Like the spontaneity of how it comes out makes it more organized than if you considered beforehand, because when you do it that way, like what I'm doing right now, I can be present with you and my mind doesn't have to go to things I thought about before about how I wanted this video to be. And hang on, I'm gonna keep the phone from shaking. Let's see if I can do it. I don't know if that'll help at all because now it's on a container. Let me try it with this. Okay, sitting up straight is a little better anyway. Okay, so, and speaking of present moment, like I'm present with you right now, a bunch of my videos talk about this. Now there's the now where the spirit resides, and you go there and there's no ego. And it's a magical place where you can do all sorts of things if you can stay there, but most people can't. And those that can, they can't do it well, and so you don't see all the benefits of that. So that's the now. That's sort of a spiritual place. Also, and then on the other end, you hear people say, or meditations about being present, where you're just kind of like, if you're in the room, you're in the room, you're not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. And then between those two places, there's the mind getting more and more to the now, but it's not quite there. So like right now talking to you, when you have a conversation with someone, you're in the now to the extent that you're listening to what they're saying as they're saying it. And then when you're talking like this, I'm talking. And that's generally where most of what takes place, what I'm about to talk about, takes place. Because if you can get to the now, then you're invulnerable. But I've gone through some experiences recently where, and again, if you're an atheist or anything where you don't believe in this sort of thing, that's okay. Just pretend it's a story, or just maybe you'll learn some allegory or whatever. You just want to keep listening. It's okay. Don't care. Okay, so recently, and I won't say how it started because it's someone else's personal information. I won't go into that. But I'm in a townhouse. It's 2 stories. Upstairs, I got a bathroom and a bedroom, and the guest bedroom. The bedroom I used to sleep in, my whole house had fleas, so I closed it down because most of the fleas were there, and so I don't use that anymore, even though I could go in now because there's no fleas there anymore, but I'm too lazy. So instead, I slept in the guest bedroom, which would be okay, except for some reason there was some sort of oppressive entity that began to build up in the place to the extent where it would be there, and then I'd go in and it'd be gone, and then it would be there all the time. And then when I slept, I didn't realize at the time, but when I slept there, it would make it so I didn't get any sleep. So I thought I was tired just because I'm tired all the time. But then when I decided to sleep in the living room, I woke up and I felt like I actually got sleep. And so I realized there was something going on. That's when I realized there was something going on, because that's like factual, like evidence. It's like, okay, so I went from feeling like I didn't actually sleep, every night for weeks, and now I remember what a good night's sleep is, and it's the living room. And if you remember what I was talking about, you can go back to God moments, or I'm sure all sorts of videos where I talk about God's presence and how God's presence does 3 things. It provides information, it provides protection, and it gives comfort or peace. And so I always have that with me. It's just my training, and I think it's just probably a healthy thing to do. It keeps you healthy or whatever. It was hard to maintain it in that room, and when I come down the living room, it's completely like, if someone does what I do, the place you live should have that kind of quality just because you're there all the time. And so my living room had that. And so I could compare that to the bedroom upstairs. I was like, okay, so we got a problem. Now, the issue is I was like, okay, well, it's just in the bedroom. But the problem is as days went by, because I wasn't in that bedroom anymore, it started to get out, and then it went down the staircase. I know that's crazy. But also, when you walk this path, you start being able to see into the ether or spirit or whatever, and it's sort of like in the mind's eye thing, so you kind of think it's your imagination. But then when you try to change it, because you can change your imagination, you can't change what you're looking at in your mind, so you realize it has to be from an external source, or maybe you're just crazy. But anyway, so that's how you can determine the two between imagination and what you're really seeing. So I felt it come downstairs. The presence in the bedroom actually was presence on the staircase, and it bypassed the bathroom upstairs, and it bypassed the kitchen downstairs. It's basically coming straight for the sofa I was sitting on. It took place over the course of like weeks, maybe like 2 or 3 weeks. And then it finally, one night it got to the sofa, and then I had shitty sleep like I did upstairs in my bedroom. And then I realized that it was probably going to keep spreading until it filled my entire house. I wouldn't be able to stay there, and I'd have to go like live with my mom or something. So I got some advice. I started telling people about it, and anybody that does anything like this, I didn't know it because I don't do things like this, but you put salt. If you do put a continuous line of salt around something or in a doorway or anywhere, it'll block certain things. And so I said to do that. I put crystals on top of the doorway. I did this today, by the way. That's why I'm doing the video. And I shit you not, one of those crystals, it knocked off twice. Now, if you think about it, if it's on the door frame outside the room, when the crystal falls, it's going to fall outside the room because it like tips over. For some reason, this crystal, because on the outside there's carpet, on the inside is tiles, hardwood floor. Somehow that they got the crystal to fall inside the room like that, and it hit the tile floor. It didn't break, but it could have. My grandmother asked if it broke or not. I didn't even think about it breaking. And that happened twice with that one. I actually have it duct taped, and then I duct taped that one. And then there's another one that I wedged between the door frame and the wall, which, you put a wedge in the door so it gets stuck. So it's like really stuck there. Well, somehow it still managed to fall. And all this took place just this morning. So I'm not freaked out about it. I don't know if I mentioned it, but early in 2020, I joined a ghost hunting group. So I got to go to a lot of hunting places. And I know this is not a ghost. It's some sort of unclean spirit or demon. It was not a person like ghosts were, or maybe a ghost of an animal or whatever. And so, but the principles apply. The sensitivity I got to pick up on haunted things and know what that felt like, I could use for this now. And the great thing is the fact it's knocking off crystals means it's working. So that's great, because if it wasn't working, it wouldn't give a fuck about the crystals. So that's good. And then my downstairs feels good again. And the stairwell goes off and on, which is weird. It's almost like it's the doorway is like a dragon breathing fire, and then it goes down the hallway and then it stops. So it's not actually on the staircase, but it's still influencing it. And then somehow, again, maybe not for you, but for a lot of people, psychic people that do this kind of stuff, when you live in a place, you have a connection to that place. Even when you're gone, your mind's still somewhat in that place. So one of the things it did, even though when I'd go out and it wouldn't be out with me, but part of my mind would be in my house and it could connect with me there. And so I can still connect with it in my bedroom, and I can just feel as super, super pissed off. It's sort of like doing that thing that Darth Maul does when the force fields are up and it's just like pacing back and forth. It's basically just waiting. And I'm not going in there for my clothes. Most of my clothes are in there. It's like, fuck it. I'm going to have to figure out the next step to clear this thing out. I have a window in there I'm going to open up and eventually get it to go out, but I don't know how to go about doing this. And you think, having God's presence with me all the time and actually having experience dealing with this kind of, being attacked demonically, or however you want to say it, you think I would be able to know how to deal with this, but honestly I don't, just because if I did, I would have fixed it in my bedroom. But I'd walk in my bedroom, instead of God's presence forcing it out, it somehow affected me so that I would have less of God's presence. So it's probably because there's different types, and then the question is how many of that type are there? So it gets really complicated. And so, but anyway, I wasn't a match for it. And then you could say, well, I wasn't a match because I'm saying it's not a match and I have low faith, and if I just believe or whatever. But everyone has a baseline of belief, and you can raise it a little bit, but when shit hits the fan, I guarantee you it's going to go back to the baseline, if not lower, because you don't have time to think or psych yourself up when you're being psychically attacked. So, and the baseline does grow over time, but for right now, and maybe God's put this thing in my life to help me grow or whatever, who knows. And, but anyway, I'd make a video about it, maybe to myself, so in 20 years I can go back and see this. And, but the protection part with God's presence, so obviously it hasn't been able to harm me, but it'll take whatever it can get, it'll use it. It wants to make my life as miserable as possible. So if it can get me fired, that'd be great. If it can get me in the hospital, that'd be better. But there's limits to, what it can do or what God allows it to do. Now, if I didn't have God's presence, I would probably be in a really shitty situation right now. I don't even know what would have happened. Now, granted, though, if I didn't, would God have sent that to me? Because, he wouldn't have been ready. And maybe he just always sends, the ones that are just a little bit better than your faith, so you have to struggle and grow, that kind of thing. I have no idea. It'd be nice to think that, though. So I wanted to say more. Pretty much everything I said right now is the prologue to what I was going to say. But having said all that, I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. I guess maybe just a little bit. Now, the reason I say unclean spirits instead of demons or demonic activity is because when you speak certain words, they have energy. And when you say demon, that has an energy to it. And you say Satan, that has an energy to it. So if you say unclean spirits, it's a little more tame. It's just a spirit or whatever. And unclean spirits is another term used in the Bible when Jesus was casting out demons or whatever. I think it was, probably used both or whatever. So it's easier that way, and I'm only saying them just to give reference. If anybody is energy sensitive, especially when you walk the path where you're growing in God's presence and you become more and more psychic, have more and more energy, move energy around and do things like that, and grow into what a human being is supposed to be. So that kind of person, as they get more powerful, their words will have more of a resonance when they speak. And there's accounts in the Bible where someone would say, this is going to happen to you, and then it happens to them just because basically bends the fate of that person just because they said that it was going to be that way. And then other people, you can know, like, if you're like sick and then someone comes into the hospital room and says, you're going to die. You're so sick, you're going to die. Sick, die. And you're like, that's going to, something bad's going to fucking happen. So it's not like a supernatural thing, and then also the other thing is like, oh, you're getting better. You're well. Like, think about the word well, just the way it sounds, like well, like that has a healthy feeling to it. And sick, like, see how sick is sort of like a and then well. So like there's things going on here. The languages weren't just haphazardly, formed. I mean, they were, grew over time, but there's still thought, unconscious thought put in these things. And so that's the other thing. Anybody knows anything about exorcism, demon possession, and even if you just watch movies, you know that you command it to leave. And then the question is, why is a multi-thousand-year-old being listen to a human being? And the reason is because Jesus can't be there, at least not in the physical, but we're there, so Jesus gives us his authority. So when I say leave in the name of Jesus, what I'm basically doing is like, I'm a police officer and I have a badge, and my badge is my sign of authority, and my badge is what Jesus gave me. So I act on his behalf. And the demons know that. So they know there's, in the spiritual realm, after Jesus rose from the dead, basically what happens is demons are still around, but they're lawless. So if you go and you fill a room with God's presence, it's sort of like going into a black back alleyway where people will go and get mugged, and you just shine spotlights in there with police cars. Now, if there's any bad guys back there, they're not there anymore. And if there are, you arrest them. And so you shine the light of God's presence into the darkness. If they don't flee, you tell them to leave. And if they don't, you fucking, you can binding, if anybody knows about that. There are videos on specific types of these. If you want to check it out, Doug Perry at fellowshipofthemartyrs.com, he's got videos from, I think since 2004 or something. And he has a whole list of just all the different types of demons and how you deal with them and what they're like and what they do and whatever. And binding's definitely one way, because sometimes they won't leave, so you bind them first, and so they don't have influence, and then they go. So the binding would be like the handcuffs. If you're a police officer, you handcuff the criminal, then put them in the police car. And so there's a lot of analogies to that. And then it's like, well, if the police officer tells the thief to do something, why is the thief doing it? And it's because there's a system of laws in place for that city or that location, and God's kingdom is that law. So if you pull down God's kingdom, like when Jesus said, hallowed be the name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. So he's calling down God's kingdom. That's the thing, basically, that's the civilization of heaven that then the demons have to deal with, because the law of the location in the real world is always stronger, or almost always stronger than the thieves. So the thieves have to bend to the police officers and judge and go to jail. Same thing with heaven. And then, for example, so we got the unclean spirit. Maybe it's an unclean spirit. I'm not gonna 100%, because you always got to be open to other possibilities. So, and I go up there and I tell it to leave, and I do it in Jesus' name, and it doesn't leave. And so the question is, why doesn't that apply? Because it should apply all the time. The name of Jesus controls. Every demon has to bow to the name of Jesus. So if I speak that and that resonance comes out and it doesn't bow, it's not Jesus' name that's the limiting agent, it's mine. And the evidence for that, I'm using light from a computer monitor, is that when I walk into the room, I have less of God's presence. So basically, and again, why would an unclean spirit be able to control God's presence? And it doesn't. Basically, I have less of a connection with God. It affects me somehow, so I don't have that connection as well. And so, let's say I'm a police officer, but I don't have a partner. I go by myself in that dark alleyway, and I still have a badge and the laws, and I have a little remote control where I can call for backup. But can you see how I'm probably in a more precarious situation in the back alleyway where there could be multiple guys, and that they may not, respond to my authority as if, there was 5 police cars, and helicopters shining lights down or whatever. So there's different levels of this. When I talk about how you maintain God's presence over time, you grow with that relationship, and then it gets stronger around you. It's always getting stronger. And, if you maintain the relationship throughout life, your daily life. But there's always a limit, because if there wasn't a limit, you wouldn't be growing, because you'd have everything. You'd basically just be like, whatever you wanted is what it would be. And in truth, that is how it is. But because of the human mind and just our state in this realm and physical existence, part of the growth is that once let's say you take your faith and it's like a quantity, because it is a quantity. I don't know what the units would be, but you could say someone has twice as much faith as someone else. I know that sounds crazy, but the way is because if you go to heal someone and you pour the entirety of your faith out, it'll have a certain level of effect. And then if someone has twice the amount of faith, when they do it, it'll have literally double the effect. And this isn't a linear thing too, it's exponential. So you'll get someone, if you start out, you got a shot glass of faith, and then maybe in 10 years, you've got a bucket, but then you got an old guy who's 75 years old, who's taking care of orphans his whole life, and, fed the poor, and, for decades. And now, so if you look at his faith, you literally look out over, it would be like the Mediterranean Sea. It's not the entire ocean, but it's an ocean. You can't see the end of it. And he has more than he needs, because, demons would not come close to that guy, because the reputation. That's another thing I won't go into, but you can, if you do this long enough, eventually demons will know who you are, and you'll have a wanted poster in hell, where they'll try to get to you. They can't because of God's presence, but they want to, because they know you're, have more influence. So if they get you, it'll be a bigger blow. They can do more badness, so they can allocate more resources. They're always tricky. The strength that they have that good people don't have is they can lie and deceive, and they trick and illusions. What you think, being good and displaying truth and authenticity, that has strength too, as far as working in a group, in a community. But if you're a one-on-one, if you're one police officer in a back alleyway and there's a thief, and it's just him and then one you, well, you can't fool the thief. You're a freaking police officer. You can't hide in the back alleyway. That thief can do whatever the fuck. You're on his turf now. So again, it's the same thing. And eventually your reputation gets so big, they'll just leave you alone. And the best thing you can do is just be off the radar, because angels, demons, whatever. In the spiritual realm, things are eternal, so you can't kill a demon, but you can control it by all the things I'm talking about. If it doesn't do anything, then you can, basically, God's spirit touching a demon can't be where God is. If God's somewhere, a demon can't be there. It's like darkness can't be where there's light. But if the influence of God is on a demon, it feels like burning sulfur, acid, hottest fire you can think of. It really fucks them up, and so you can use that to torture them. And there's references of torturing demons in the Bible, and then control them that way. And then if you get a reputation for that, the demons will know, remember that guy? That guy was my boss. He tortured him and ran. Oh no, I don't want to get tortured, and that kind of thing. And it gets more and more. I could talk more about how their hierarchy is based off fear. So it's if someone will come out, so and so. I know this sounds fucking crazy, but hypothetically, if you've gotten to the point where you acknowledge demons exist, this is the next thing. Demons can't exist and not have some sort of organizational. So I'm telling you, this is part of what it is. It's worse than anything I can imagine, or anything anybody can imagine. One of the things is, if God sends out an angel, it's based off love. The angel obeys God, and there's that love connection, because heaven's love and community. When the hell side, when the demon gets sent out, it's based off fear. Basically, if the demon doesn't do what it's told, a lot of bad things are going to happen to it. So you got to make sure there's more bad things happening to it if it comes to you than it would be if it disobeyed their orders. And then it's fucked, but they're the weak reagent or whatever. Again, I've learned a lot of this from Doug Perry, fellowshipmartyrs.com. I before I knew anything, I listened to him and somehow knew what he was saying was true. It was batshit crazy, but I knew it was true. And so I was like, well, if this is true, I had to start knocking down the dominoes and being like, well, then this is not true, and then this isn't true. And then watching this video, if you've been on the spiritual walk, you'll know how along the way you start knocking down dominoes. Well, I got a lot of them knocked down all at once. Thought I was crazy for a while, but you can't unknow what you know. And I really didn't even start growing. That was in 2007 or 8. I really didn't even start my journey until 2012 or 13. So, but then as I built up, my base level of faith over the years, I eventually got to the point where it's like, okay, this makes sense. And then it's weird not to have demons. And I know it sounds crazy. If you haven't been exposed to this, it sounds crazy. It's okay. You can think I'm crazy. It's okay. I don't care. Hopefully some of you don't, but as your faith gets bigger, it becomes more evident and more self-evident and more clear that these things are true, that there are principalities affecting people, and you get to see it firsthand because your faith gives you eyes to see, and so you notice things other people don't notice, and then it becomes second nature, where I can say this to you just matter-of-factly with no ego, and then I'm sure some people listening to this are going to think I'm batshit crazy, but again, if I'm talking with you in normal voice, I have a normal demeanor, I have logic. So like a crazy person wouldn't have any of that. So the only other thing it could be is like I was brainwashed in a cult or something like that. But if that was the case, then I wouldn't be saying it's okay for you to think I'm batshit crazy, because I would be indoctrinated and have an ego and be like, well, if you don't believe me, then you're damned because you're part of the demons. It'd be like that kind of thing. There are people like that. But anyone with a real background knows truth, knows that you start out not believing this stuff. If you're born into this world, this isn't taught in school. You're not going to go to Sunday school and learn about any of this. Like, you really have to stumble upon like a really rare thing and want to pursue that to come across any of this. And that's the way it's set up with the whole like illusion, trickery, lying thing or whatever. Why would demons even make themselves known? Why would they do that? Because like the idea is like, oh, if they're real, then where are they? If they were real, it would be exactly how it is right now. And then we'd be like, well, why don't angels show themselves? And the answer is they do. But you have to develop the abilities, just like you talk with God and pray and you hear God over time, eventually you'll start to see other things. I know that sounds crazy too, but it's true. If you don't believe me, whatever. So anyway, that's a lot of information. And again, this is just a highlight of things. If you really want to delve, like if you think you've got something on you, and again, Christians can have something, anybody can have something on them. And if you want to know the difference between oppression and possession, all that, it's just a whole nother video. But if you think you have something on you, definitely go check out Fellowship of the Martyrs, and then maybe you'll check out one of the symptoms of one of the things he's talking about and be like, yeah, that matches mine. And then, you can find someone that can help you, or you can do it yourself or whatever. There's different things to do. There are very clear cases, no matter how big a person's faith is, that if they're in a certain situation, they need help. They need to get someone that's not in that situation to help them. So it's okay to ask for help. And the overriding truth of the situation, like God's presence always brings truth, and the truth is you're always okay. Like that is overarching everything else. And when you're in a situation though where you're dealing with it, like that's the first thing that falls away. You think the world's ending and you're fucked forever or whatever, and saying it's horrible. But you logically, like what I would do, I was like, logically, I know everything's still okay. And then with the logic, you can make the actions, because you control your actions directly. They're not fueled by emotions, they can be influenced, but you make the decision to pick up the phone and push the buttons, the dial, and then talk to the person and speak, what's happening, and just think of the next thing and do that before you kill yourself, because that's their playbook. They want you to kill yourself. I'm sure there's other things too, but, it's like an Alcoholics Anonymous, like how they get in groups, and if you think you're about to break, then you call someone and they come and they check you. Like, it's got to be the same thing. Now, granted, most people, it never gets to that point, but that is one of the things, because you got to think, if the demon wants the worst thing to happen to you, killing you is probably the best thing, and it's even better if you kill yourself. So, because they won't have direct influence over you in that way, usually, as far as I know, because of God's presence. Anyway, so that's another thing. Maintain logic. Remember what you remembered before it was happening. Take actions as if you knew those things, and always have someone that you can call to deal with this. And I think that's it. It's 24 minutes, too long of a video. I hope somebody got something out of this. I'm working on it right now. You can just see in my eyes, I'm like exhausted dealing with this thing. So, but hopefully, it always ends up something better. God always works for the, take whatever, and he works for the good of those who love him and called to his purpose. So again, it's a logical thing that I don't feel right now, but it's logic, so I can use that and be like, okay, what's the next step? Anyway, this is Steve, Rescape 2.0. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys later.